Hello everyone. In this video, I will explain the principle of least astonishment or principle of least surprise. What is principle of least astonishment? A component of a system should behave in a way that most users will expect it to behave. The behavior should not astonish or surprise the users. Why this principle is important? People have something called natural reflex, an action that is performed without conscious thought as a response to a stimulus, and we would like to go with that flow. Let's look at a real world example. You see this door and want to open it. You try to pull the door using the handle. It doesn't open. There is a moment of surprise. Then you read the sign and then you push the door, because pulling the door is your natural reflex and is driven from your spinal cord, muscle memory. Reading the sign and then acting based on that is done by your rational brain. When natural reflex fail, there is a surprise. This is what we want to avoid. We want our systems to help people. So how did they solve this in real world? Let us see. Applying the principle, don't provide a handle if one has to push open a door, and provide a handle only if the door is to be pulled. Your reflex works and there is no surprise. Why this principle applies to software design? Like reflex, developer or people in common have something called intuition, the ability to understand something instinctively without the need for conscious reasoning. This will speed up the developer. Let's look at some software examples from JavaScript, C# and Java, where this principle is broken and the resultant friction. Always follow universal concepts. This is number one. Let us assume you want to represent a day, say 31st January 2021. You create a data object representing this in JavaScript. Let's give a try. I'm going to use the Jupyter Notebook feature from the Visual Studio Code so that we can focus on the particular code snippet. Let's execute this code. You can see I created a JavaScript data object and then we printed the data object here, and then the date prints March 3rd 2021. So what is happening here? JavaScript date has month represented as 0 to 11. It means 31st February 2021. But there is no 31st February. If there is a 31st February, shouldn't we get an error? Again, if the date value is wrong, then it automatically adjusts date on its own to a valid date. So the date that we declared is 31st January 2021. JavaScript converted that into 3rd March 2021. This kind of implementation will surprise the user for sure. So don't try to redefine universally accepted concepts. Ensure complete implementation is done and you adhere to the contract. In C#, an array implements iList interface. Let's give a try. I declare an iList of int and then assign a integer array to that. Then I try to add an element to this array. Let's see what happens. You can see this throws a system.not-supported exception. So someone decided to implement iList interface for an array, even though array is a fixed collection in .NET. When you try to use the object as iList, the implementer denies the contract. This kind of implementation too will give a surprise to the clients. So don't do partial implementations. And choose the correct interface. That is very important. Next one is consistent parameter order and hierarchies. Again, let's try the code. Initially in the method, you threw argument exception with a message username cannot be null and the parameter name as username. Now someone points that you have argument null exception for that use case. So you see argument null exception is a argument exception. So you just switch the names now and let's see what happens. So first let us try to run this code with argument exception. You can see the code through argument exception and said argument username cannot be null and parameter name is username. Now we change the exception to argument null exception and then we have the same parameters. Let's execute this. Now the message is username and the parameter name is argument username cannot be null. So you can spot the problem that the argument null exceptions parameter order and argument exceptions parameter order are flipped. So the order of the parameter in the base class and the derived class is not consistent here. Even though it doesn't cost you much, in this example, in scientific applications and other serious applications, the order of the values really matter a lot, especially in hierarchies. So if there is a change, then it can create some real serious errors. So be very careful with the consistent parameter order. Next one is about naming. If you want one takeaway from this whole video, then remember the names matter. It communicates some important perspectives and information. Let's look at the code. You create a date and add one day to it. That's how this looks like. Let's run and see the code. Let's run it. You can see there is no change because in .NET datetime is an immutable struct. So this method returns a new object. Again, a developer knows all the primitives like int, float, string are immutable. But often I have seen developers think datetime as a class and later learn that it is a struct. The add days looks like a mutating method, but in reality it is not a mutating method and this method always returns a new object. Again, this kind of implementations can cause confusion and then some surprises to the user. Let's look at another example. So here we create two data objects and then find the time span between them. Let's run the code. So I created two data objects and then I'm trying to run it. You can see the time span in seconds is coming as 0. Definitely between my time zone and UTC there is a time difference. So this cannot be 0. If you look closely, seconds property gives the second part of time span. If you want time span in seconds, you should call total seconds. Let's run the new code. So I have changed time span dot seconds to time span dot total seconds now. If you run it, you can see it provides the correct value. Again, I wonder the main use case of time span is to find the time span in various measures like hours, minutes and seconds. But they are represented as total hours, total minutes and total seconds. So this also sometimes when you are writing code, you may get misguided and confused sometimes. Let's look at another example. This time it is from Java. In Java, you can create a thread by creating anonymous thread class with a overridden run method. The next step is to run the thread. So you call thread.run. Let's run the code. You can see the thread ID of the current thread and the new thread whatever we have created are one and the same. That means there is no new thread that is created. If you want to create a new thread, then you should call thread.start. Let's run the code. We will see the new thread ID. Let me run the new code here. You can see the thread ID is 21 for the existing thread and for the new thread it is 24. So here, like our door example, your natural intuition is to call the run method. Then later you read the documentation and use the start method. So run and start are close enough when it comes to thread. You want to run the thread, you want to start the thread. So both are like something that is doable. So initially a programmer, even I myself have several times called run and then later realized that I should call start. So names are very, very important, and ensure that you take care of naming. In the end, the perspective is very important. The perspective from which you design the API names and the user's perspective might differ. Before implementing your code, try your own code from the user's perspective. It's like this picture. Either you can see a young girl in this picture, or you may see a old hag. It depends on the perspective from where you start and from where you look. Looking from this user perspective definitely will open up your mind and provide some good insights, and it will help you design and provide much better names. I would like to conclude with the quote from Dieter. Design should not dominate things, not dominate people. It should help people. I have covered some basic examples here. I hope you get the point. Thanks for the time. See you in another video sometime soon.